So, I've talked before about how I got into this business. I'm a novelist. I've been a novelist all my life. I worked in Hollywood by accident. They kind of dragged me into the movie business, and I made some money doing it, so I kept doing it. But mostly, I write stories. I've written stories all my life. But there came a point when I became a loudmouth about politics. There's a certain point in your life, politics become very important to you. The real world becomes very important to you. You're worried about your kids, and you're worried about the future. And I started to talk about that, and that kind of damaged my Hollywood career. And I also found that I really liked hanging out with conservatives because they were smarter than leftists, and they were smarter than a lot of people who do the kind of work I do. And so I really enjoyed it. And I found that as I was hanging out at these parties, I kept running into Roger Simon. And Roger Simon is funny because he is a former mystery writer, a crime writer. That's what I am, a crime writer, crime novel writer, and a screenwriter. And that's what I've been, a screenwriter with a shaved head. So it's kind of like, and he's about I think he's about 30 years older than I am, but he says he's about 10 years older than I am. So it's kind of like bumping into myself, and he kept saying, I'm building, this is a funny way of talking, a guy very New York way of talking. He says, I'm building this site, PJ TV, you want to come by? And I kept running into him. And finally I went and looked at PJ TV and I saw Bill Whittle and I thought, oh, Whittle can do this. Anyway, I was just sending my dog to do this. And I got into this. My first video was called Shut Up. And it was, I think it actually made a big change in the way people did political videos. I actually think it had an effect, certainly on PJ TV, because everybody shortened their videos, made them a little more satirical, a little funnier. And my point was just that the only argument the left ever makes is shut up. And they do it in a million different ways. They call you racist. They call you sexist. They call you, a fascist. You're worse than Hitler, whatever it is. It's just another way of saying shut up. And interestingly, at the time, Obama had just been president for a while, and I was picking on him from going around kowtowing to all these tyrants. Remember, he was bowing to all those sheiks and everything, and also for spending a lot of money. So now everybody's complaining that Trump is doing that. Everybody on the left is complaining that Trump congratulated Putin on his fake election victory, and they're saying, oh, he's kowtowing to tyrants. And of course, if they sign this 1.3, I can't believe they're talking about this. This is a 2,200-page spending bill, and nobody knows what's in it. Everybody's complaining about what's in it, but nobody knows what's in it. All I know is that Chuck Schumer looks happy, so it's not good, But the argument that all they ever do is tell us to shut up remains exactly true. And now we have this Mark Zuckerberg story. A psychologist or a psychiatrist, I can't remember which it was, went on Facebook, put on an app that had a personality test, and then shared that information with Cambridge Analytica, which used it for political purposes. They don't like the political purposes. So now the stuff that Obama was doing, basically data mining, is suddenly a problem. Everybody on the left especially, is calling for an investigation. And Zuckerberg went on TV and he says that he is going to take care of it. Do we have, that's just cut 9.
This was a major breach of trust. And I'm really sorry that this happened. We have a basic responsibility to protect people's data. And if we can't do that, then we don't deserve to have the opportunity to serve people. So our responsibility now is to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And there are a few basic things that I think we need to do to ensure that. One is making sure that developers like Alexander Kogan, who got access to a lot of information and then improperly used it, just don't get access to as much information going forward. So we are doing a set of things to restrict the amount of access that developers can get going forward. But the other is we need to make sure that there aren't any other Cambridge Analyticas out there, right, or folks who have improperly accessed data. So we're going to go now and investigate every app that has access to a large amount of information from before we lock down our platform. And if we detect any suspicious activity, we're going to do a full forensic audit.
So this can't be good. I mean, it cannot be good. A forensic audit by Mark Zuckerberg. They're going to investigate any app that is suspicious to them. We already know that by this trumpeting of fake news, we already know that the left has infiltrated these sites because they're all very leftist. All the people there are very leftist, and it's infiltrated sites, YouTube, Google, Twitter, Facebook, with these guys who are going to so-called they're going to check for so-called fake news, but they're all leftists. The Southern Poverty Law Center, PolitiFact, Snopes. These are all left-wing organizations, very left-wing organizations, and even Facebook's commitment to only trusting certain brands of news privileges essentially the mainstream news media, which is now so far to the left that it's gone almost completely insane. And there's Mark Warner and other Democrats are calling for an investigation of Facebook, and they want Zuckerberg to testify. And Zuckerberg is saying, yes, we may need some regulation. This is not a good scenario as far as I'm concerned, because we always know what the leftist policy to free speech is. Here it is.
Don't speak. Don't speak. Please don't speak.
That's all. That basically is a policy statement from the left. Every Democrat voted to rewrite the First Amendment to give Congress the ability to determine what political speech should be allowed. Here, let me just give you a couple of examples of things that have just been happening very, very recently that show you this strain in our culture that is getting worse and worse. YouTube is entering the gun control debate with a new ban on videos which demo firearms or link to websites selling firearms or firearm accessories. So
don't speak. Don't speak. Please don't speak.
Exactly. YouTube is entering the gun control debate by stopping the gun control debate on YouTube, right? It is essentially the move to ban firearm demos dovetails with the media platform's desire to prohibit videos with instructions on how to assemble firearms. Of course, guns built at home have not been part of any mass attacks or any. At one high school in New Jersey, I mean, just keeping this thought in mind, the silencing of conservative speech. At one high school in New Jersey, they suspended 3 kids for posting photos of their day shooting guns. They suspended a kid in New Jersey for a bumper sticker supporting guns. His dad went into the school board. We have a little clip of him talking to the school board. This is great.
I'd like to see 4 things happen. I would like to see the board specifically admit that they've made an error and they've done something they shouldn't have. They do not need to disclose the students' names or their privacy to do that. To apologize for that error. To make a statement that they are going to aspire to no longer violate the Supreme Court decision or the constitutional rights of the parents or the children. And the person or people who made that decision should resign or be terminated effective immediately.
There were like 200 parents there applauding, and it's great that they're fighting back. But just the idea that you could censor kids for what they are saying, for their support of the Constitution off campus, is absolutely insane. Here's another one. Last week, a university, here's another thing that's happening, is the silencing and the bullying of any speaker in favor of Israel, the state of Israel. Last week, a University of Virginia panel featuring Israeli military reservists was forcefully disrupted, apparently violating multiple campus rules. Several days earlier at the University of California at Berkeley, there was an anti-Semitic death threat against a Jewish professor. A week prior to that, students wishing to hear the moderate Israeli former minister Dan Meridor at London's King's College were confronted with a menacing mob of screaming demonstrators. At Princeton University in November, the local Hillel chapter canceled at the last minute a talk by Israel's deputy foreign minister in response to pressure from pro-peace students. You want to hear maybe the greatest one? I won't keep doing this, but an all-women's college in Massachusetts is telling its teachers not to say women in the classroom. But yeah,
don't speak. Don't speak. Please don't speak.
Exactly. Professors are instructed to say Mount Holyoke students instead of Mount Holyoke women, and don't use the phrase "we're all women here," because people might discover you're all women there. Michael Barone has an article. By the way, women are the worst enemies of speech. A poll of college students sponsored by the American Council on Education, the Charles Koch Foundation, and the Stoughton Foundation asked students about free speech on campus, whether it's allowed and whether it should be. This is from an article by Michael Barone. Majorities of students polled said they supported both free speech and inclusion and diversity when asked which was more important. 53% said inclusion and diversity, and only 46% said free speech. So more people think inclusion and diversity is important than free speech, which is insane. But the difference between men and women was the most striking thing. Among men, 61% favored free speech, but only 35% of women favored free speech. And why? Why? Because feminism is dependent on a false narrative about men and women being the same. And when you're peddling a false narrative, you've got to silence any narrative that is going to be opposed to them, because people hear a narrative that's true immediately and they go, oh yeah, that's true, that's obviously true, so you've got to silence it. You cannot peddle a false narrative while other people are peddling the truth. You will lose that argument. So, Trump is making these, telling why he ignored the counsel of his security people and decided to tell Trump and to tell Putin congratulations. Of course, Trump has no obligation to follow his advisors. And the fact that they leaked this is a big deal, because there couldn't have been that many people who knew what he was being advised. So Trump tweets, I called President Putin of Russia to congratulate him on his election victory. Obama called him also in the past. The fake news media is crazed because they wanted me to excoriate him. They're wrong. Getting along with Russia and others is a good thing, not a bad thing. Russia can help solve problems with North Korea, Syria, Ukraine, ISIS, Iran, and even the coming arms race. Bush tried to get along, but he didn't have the smarts. Obama and Clinton tried, but didn't have the energy or chemistry. Peace through strength. So that's nonsense, because all of the problems that he's talking about, North Korea, Syria, Ukraine, ISIS, Putin's on the other side of those issues. He's not there to help. That's not the point. But obviously, this is the way Trump thinks. He does think I can make this deal. I'm the great deal maker. On the news, John Brennan, we played a little bit of this yesterday, but I'm going to play another cut. John Brennan, Obama's former CIA guy, is suddenly suggesting that Trump is being blackmailed by Putin. And he has said openly he has no proof of this. So a former CIA guy is accusing the president of being blackmailed with this smug little look on his face. That is an amazing lapse of professional and personal integrity. That's an amazing lapse. I mean, nothing Trump has done, really, nothing Trump has done has ever risen up to the level of what Brennan is saying. But listen to this montage. This is, again, from our friends at Newsbusters. This is a montage of the media picking up this completely fake story. I mean, talk about fake news. This is a completely speculative story saying the president of the United States is being blackmailed by a tyrant, completely made up. Listen.
The Russians, I think, have had long experience with Mr. Trump and may have things that they could expose.
Something personal, perhaps?
Perhaps.
There's obviously something that we all have been talking about for months that Russians have on Donald Trump, whether it's related to money or sex, I don't know, or both, but there's something there.
Do you think there's a nefarious reason? Is there something sinister going on, or is this just Donald Trump having great confidence in his own personal diplomacy?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't think we fully understand the answer, and I think that's one of the reasons why the special counsel's investigation is so important.
It's just astonishing behavior by the President of the United States to make this phone call. What is going on?
So do you agree with John Brennan that it looks like possibly this is about the Russians having something on President Trump?
What is with the president's interest in these dictators broadly, and Vladimir Putin specifically? What is the blind spot there?
Well, that's the biggest question of all, and that's the question I don't think we know the answer to. That may be something that turns the key in the Russia probe, is figuring out why this president is so deferential to Putin and to Russia, and if there is some sort of compromat that they have on him, if there is another reason why he may be susceptible to basically blackmail by the Russians.
So they now feel free to make up any narrative they want, basically. They feel that they have worked themselves up into this horror at Trump's existence, and they can make any narrative they want. I mean, they could be saying, yeah, Trump likes power. He said this stuff about Tiananmen Square, that the Chinese were strong in Tiananmen Square when they crushed their own people who were protesting peaceably. That was a stupid thing for Trump to say. You could call him on that. But what on earth are they doing? There's a theory going around today. I think I've spoken about this book, Sapiens, which is a big bestseller. Yuval Harari, an Israeli guy, has written this book, and he puts forward this theory, which has been going around anyway, that what makes humans unique is their ability to link themselves together by telling what he calls fictions. Okay, so he says sapiens rule the world, that's us, sapiens, because we are the only animal that can cooperate flexibly in large numbers. We can create mass cooperation networks in which thousands and millions of complete strangers work together towards common goals. The mysterious glue we use is stories, not genes. We cooperate effectively with strangers because we believe in things like gods, nations, money, and human rights. Yet none of these things exists outside the stories that people invent and tell to one another. There are no gods in the universe, no nations, no money, and no human rights except in the common imagination of human beings. Now, as a man who has created fictions all my life, I can tell you that this is completely backwards. Fiction is a way of communicating truth. Right? Fiction only works when you are communicating the truth. It's just not the sort of truth that people like Yuval Harari understand, because it's not material truth. Countries do exist. I understand why he says they're a fiction, that they are. He gives credit to what he calls intersubjective reality, things we all create together, but he doesn't understand that that intersubjective reality is, if it works, is based on a truth. Jonah Goldberg does this in his book, and I love Jonah, and he's a really good writer, and he's written this book, The Suicide of the West. But he says, John Locke, the great philosopher who inspired some of the founding fathers, John Locke said we are all born as a blank slate, and John Locke used that to counter the idea of the divine right of kings and the rights of the aristocracy. And Goldberg says that's just a story, because we're not, in fact, born with blank slates. That's true. We are not. But the part of the story that's true is the part that works, see? The thing is, he got the science wrong, but he did get the story right. That is the way stories work. And, math is a fiction. There's no such thing as two, but we find that it's a fiction that correlates to reality. When we do our calculations right, we can predict the future. Fiction is a language used to contain and communicate spiritual truths, the same way that our body, our flesh, is a language that is used to express the spiritual truth of us. And Jesus' body is a language used to express the Logos. Religion is a fiction to describe the Spirit, but it matters whether that description is true. It matters whether a religion gets it right or not. And because they think that all of these things are equal fictions, then all they think is they have to sell the fiction. If any fiction is as good as any other, all you got to do is sell it. And how do you sell it? I sell it by silencing the person telling a fiction I don't like. That's the theory. That is the thesis going on by what you're seeing in the press. And you've got to keep your ball on the truth, because the stories we tell have to relate to truth.